Importance of empathy. We all live in our own version of reality, a reality that is limited by our senses, our temperament, and our own experiences. It is the only reality we will ever truly know, but it is crucial to our personal development, our relationships, and to society itself that we make the effort to try and experience other people's realities as well. This is done through empathy. Simply stated, empathy is an active attempt to understand another person's perspective, their emotions, and in essence, their reality. We are social animals, and our ability to communicate and understand each other's emotional states is key to maintaining our relationships. So it is little wonder that the ability to empathize is hardwired directly into our brains. One area that assists in this process is the right supramarginal gyrus, which helps us to distinguish our own emotional state from that of another person, and plays a key role in our ability to observe and assess what other people are experiencing. Studies from Neuron Science Journal suggest that we have systems of mirror neurons in our brains that cause us to mimic the actions of others. That is why when we see someone yawn, we will often yawn in reply. And when we observe someone experiencing joy or pain, we experience the same sensation to a certain extent. But these reactions are primarily driven by subconscious reflexes. In order to be truly empathic, you have to actively think beyond yourself and your own concerns. You can develop this empathic skill by practicing some simple habits. Be observant of others. We tend to spend the majority of our day dwelling on ourselves, caught up in our own daily routines and digital distractions. But taking the time to observe others around you is a good first step in developing your empathy. Watch and wonder. Try to focus on the person's state of being rather than categorizing or labeling them. Ask yourself, what kind of day are they having? How are they feeling? Challenge yourself to genuinely care about their well-being. Curiosity about others is the first step to expanding your empathy. Use active listening. During a conversation, especially a heated one, most people formulate their response before the other person even finishes their statement. This form of communication is more verbal combat than an exchange of ideas or opinions. Avoid this reflex by slowing down. Rather than rushing to reply, take a moment to consider the other person's statement. Ask follow-up questions to better understand what the speaker intended. Try to understand.
Madam President.
Majority Leader.
Yes, for the information of members, I have a brief statement. I have some good news. We've reached an agreement on an extension of the debt ceiling through early September, and it's our hope that we can get this done today. What did I say? Oh, Jesus. September's passed already. Let me revise my statement. Madam President, we have reached agreement to extend the debt ceiling through early December, and it's our hope that we can get this done as soon as today. I yield the floor.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics. Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today?
It's a pivotal week for President Biden and Democrats as they try to pass their massive $3.5 trillion spending plan. And according to them, the whole thing actually cost $0.
It is zero price tag on debt. We're paying for everything we spend. It's going to be zero.
This is a $0 bill because it's going to be completely paid for.
This package, the reconciliation package, will cost $0.
Meanwhile, House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy blasts Nancy Pelosi and the push for massive spending.
If you add that with the infrastructure bill, you're talking more than $5 trillion, more money than we spent in winning World War II. It was interesting the Speaker Pelosi there didn't want to talk about the numbers. To say that it's paid for by putting a debt onto the next generation of Americans.
You know, Katie, I had a job one time that involved math. It didn't work out well for me. I taught for a living now, so I'm not an expert on economics. But,
Neither are the Democrats.
I don't know if anyone in Congress is. Yeah, we'll say that. But this is a tax bill
Say,
first,
that
right?
was
Isn't this a
pretty
tax?
good, boys. Yes,
Are they
they're
doing this because they
pretty
think that
good.
Americans just don't think it's going to
Peace
touch
on
regular
earth,
Americans?
goodwill
When you're
to
talking
men.
about trillions of dollars, people kind of tune out. You know,
Peace
$3
on
trillion.
earth was
What's
a
$5 trillion?
good
It's a
idea.
hard thing to really
Too
get
bad
your
they didn't
arms around,
practice
right?
what they
But the
preach.
administration claims that this is going to be paid for by taxing the rich, so people who need to pay their fair share.
them men.
At the same time, they're saying they want to snoop through the IRS on everybody's bank account to
I guess
manage
that
any
was
transaction
before your
over
time,
$600. $600
Well, there
is a
ain't
pretty
no
regular
more
paycheck.
men
That's
in
a
the
minimum
world.
wage paycheck. That's a middle
No.
class paycheck.
No
That's definitely
more
a paycheck
men.
coming from someone who makes
But
less
as
than
I remember,
$400,000 a year. So
well,
Joe
they
Biden
was
is
all
claiming that
good
he's not going to
things.
raise taxes. He's going to
Some of them would scuttle along on their hind legs, and some of them would slither along on their bellies.
The House passed a bill in May, and the Senate went on vacation. I mean, you just don't do that. You negotiate. Senator, it is a national crisis. If you want to call yourself a leader, you got to get things done. And those of us that served in the Marines, we don't just point fingers at the other side. We get the job done.
They wore big iron pots on their heads. Their eyes flashed. And they had tremendous snouts. Snouts like this that curled down and fastened onto their stomachs.
Gee, I'm sure glad there ain't no more men in the world.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists.
Gosh, me too.
No, I never could figure out them men. They was always thinking up new ways to kill each other.
Action off the table in a round.
Nothing's, honestly, nothing is off the table.
All right, out.
I haven't eased anything.
They had guns that shot out streams of liquid fire. Everything it touched burst into flame. And they had pipes, big ones like giant pea shooters that sent bombs whizzing through the air. Then they thought up a new kind of gun. A gun that could kill men faster than ever before. Oh, it was a terrible thing. They were always fighting. And when they weren't fighting on the ground, they were fighting in the air. It was furious fighting. Bombs bursting everywhere and shells whistling through the air like this. It seemed like the idea was to see which side could kill the most. They the bombs bigger and bigger. Pretty soon they were blowing up whole cities.
And then what?
And then each one of them built the biggest, the most awfulest bomb ever. And while one of them was dropping a bomb over here, the other one was dropping a bomb over there. And that was the end of the last man on earth. Everything was quiet and kind of peaceful like. Those of us that were left gathered in the ruins of a church. I was just a little shaver at the time, and I asked the wise old owl what that book was he was reading. Well, he says, looks like a book of rules that belong to them men. Thou shalt not kill. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Looks like some pretty good rules, but I guess them men didn't pay much attention to them. Yes, it was a good book of rules, and it still is a good book of rules. Love thy neighbor as thyself. On these words depend the future of us all.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
All together now, boys.
Hark the herald angels sing, glory to the Lord our King. Peace on earth, goodwill to man, peace on earth shall reign again. Joyful all ye creatures be, he has blessed the world in free. To the world he gives.
Still on the subject of securing America on nuclear weapons, President Obama reportedly considered changing the nation's long-standing policy on first use. Do you support the current policy? Mr. Trump, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I have to say that what Secretary Clinton was saying about nuclear with Russia, she's very cavalier in the way she talks about various countries. But Russia's been expanding. They have a much newer capability than we do. We have not been updating from the new standpoint. I looked the other night, I was seeing B-52s. They're
Game over.
old enough that your father, your grandfather could be flying them.
Over.
We are not keeping up with other countries. I would like everybody to end it, just get rid of it. But I would certainly not do
Jack
first strike.
Kammer
I think that
is with us
once
here
the
today.
nuclear
How are you doing?
alternative
I'm very well,
happens,
Toby. How are you?
I'm doing
it's
great
over.
today.
At the same
Now,
time, we
you
have to be
kind of
prepared. I
style
can't take
yourself
anything off the table.
as the counter
because you look at some of these
So
countries.
can you just describe a little bit about what the ideology of counter-feminism actually is?
Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.
Okay, certainly. I call myself the counter-feminist social worker. It's important to mention to your listeners that I was a social worker, and so I was very keen on understanding social problems. So social work is very, very, very feminist. I'm speaking of the US, don't know what the situation is in the UK. I doubt it's much different, but it might be. The primary social work education organization in the US offers a feminist scholarship award. It's very feminist. We hear a lot in social work education about the patriarchy and male dominance. And anytime there's a discussion about domestic violence, it's always the male perpetrator and the female victim. So a counter-feminist is distinct from an anti-feminist. An anti-feminist listens to discussions of sexism against women and problems women have. An anti-feminist will say, nah, bunch of baloney. A counter-feminist says, yes, that's all true, maybe with some exaggerations, but yes, there are problems women suffer by virtue of their gender, and so do men.
Yeah.
And so do men. And please,
Free thinking, innovative, totally open-minded, Tommy Nation politics, guys. Thanks for being here this Thursday. It's a thirsty Thursday, guys. 38% approval rating in a Fox News poll. 55% of Americans in a Bloomberg poll believe the Biden administration is incompetent. Joe Biden has a God complex. I think that Batman would be satisfied with his query, when pondering Superman's godlike attributes. Do you bleed? Yes. Apparently gods bleed. In fact, the Democratic Party gods bleed hard. And they're hemorrhaging at the moment. But these frauds are nothing but false gods, guys. Illusions, just like the Matrix itself. For the past 30 to 50 years, we've been pulled into a downward trajectory with neoliberal policies. Fewer skills diminished as far as men go. Employment rates, lower wages. Now there's lower college enrollment rates. Half a century ago, men accounted for almost 60% of college students, women 40%. Now that number has completely flipped. Men make up about 40% of the college students, and the number could continue to drop. Men are unenrolling from college. Could it be the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac debacle of 2008 when they bailed out the banks and cracked the heads of peaceful protesters in Wall Street? Could it be people are starting to open their eyes to the game that's being played here, guys? Why is the game being played here? That's what we're here to figure out. Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's it going, guys? So I have a guest to help me out with this. He's a social worker, Baltimore native, prioritizes male gender issues and biases, refers to his principal focus in social work as counter-feminism. So he says, our government, anyone interested in politics, social policy, or government needs to know about gender bias against men and boys in social services. Has a master's in social work from the University of Maryland of Social Work. And I'm glad to have him on the show. So we're going to have some good conversation. I actually did my homework, so good to have you on the show, Mr. Kammer.
Yeah, it's Kammer. Good to see you, Tommy. That was quite an intro video you put together.
Thanks. I try to be ready, and I try to give my audience, the truth, nothing but the truth, and try to make it interesting. Those videos are how I learn. So, but we have a lot to talk about, especially in society today. I did some homework on you because I was very interested in your work, and the first thing that came to mind when I saw counter-feminist was, how is this going to play in the age of fact-checking, in the age of people are telling you what to say and censoring you? The feminists are going to immediately jump on counter-feminist. You explained that very well, but if you want to talk about what counter-feminism is and start with that, I'd really like to know from your own words.
Okay, sure. So you mentioned fact-checking as a possible problem. Fact-checking is really the salvation. The media really need to do a much better job of fact-checking what feminists want us to believe. I mean, from the 79 cents on the dollar to Domestic violence is a horrible thing that only men do, only to women, to the idea that women are oppressed. I'd welcome fact checking. So the idea of being a counter-feminist is distinct from being an anti-feminist. I understand and appreciate that there is a set of difficulties that women and girls face by virtue of being female. But we've been working on that set of problems for 60 years. We've made a fair degree of progress. But feminism was really defined, not in the dictionary, but in common discourse. Sexism is what men do to women. Sexism is discrimination against women. And it has occurred to me that the greatest sexism of all, the worst sexism of all, is the idea that only one sex is ever sexist and only one sex is ever harmed by sexism. Yeah, sure, men 60 years ago were confronted with some things we didn't want to really acknowledge. We thought we were better than women in a bazillion ways. And that disadvantaged women and girls greatly. We've been dealing with that for 60 years. We need to do the same for the next 60 years, probably, for men and boys. Because men and boys are also disadvantaged by stereotypes and biases and ideas that women are superior to us in some ways and we're inferior to them in some ways.
Well, there is a ladies' night, so there's not a men's night in the clubs.
That's just an example. Feminists, of course, are going to not like what I'm saying because they've been on a roll and they got a machine running, and the world is very much in tune with what they say and what they believe. And even people who don't believe it and agree with it are afraid to register an objection.
Well, Jack, speaking of the machine, why do you think these gender biases, why do you think they became so prevalent, and why do you think they were invented in the first place? What do you think?
Well, I think they remain as primitive vestiges of our primitive past. When we as humans were a small band, a very vulnerable small band of creatures wandering through the grasslands of Africa, and could have been easily wiped out, extincted by a variety of threats, we needed to muster every advantage we could muster. Everything had to be optimized. And if it happened to be, and it was the case, that men were stronger and could throw their spears farther and could kill more lions and tigers that were roaming around the campsite better than women could, well, then that was what men were going to specialize in. And if women had breasts and could feed the babies, then that's what women were going to specialize in. They're going to take care of the babies. And along the way, those specializations, in my opinion, my view, became much, much, much less essential. And we've certainly seen over the past 60 years that the essential role of women, as it was called, has been pretty strongly revamped. You really have to think twice before you can honestly say that the essential role of women is to stay home and take care of kids. For some women, their essential role is to be a kick-ass lawyer or a great doctor or a really innovative scientist. By the same token, the idea that men needed to be on the periphery of the campsite, away from the social life, away from the kids, out there in vulnerability land, where we were honored and cherished and praised for developing our instincts for doing damage and harming living things, that's still very much in our psychological DNA. And biological anthropologists would say it's in our biological DNA.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, that's right. Go ahead.
So because I have a lot of questions because I actually did some homework, and
I know you did. I saw it.
So I'm very interested in all kinds of points of view, and you've done some articles in the past because you're older than me, and so just like, but I was reading your op-eds, one in the Baltimore Sun, two that have to do with me because I'm black and I'm gay. So
Drugs, murders, and crime. Drugs, murders, crime, and the special problems of males.
I read that article, and I was happy to see that you were not part of the super predator crowd. I'm glad about that. In fact, you had a whole different kind of perspective on that. You were like, intrinsically, every human being's value is not a monetary, fiscal, kind of thing. It's more of a, to me, it's principles and values. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the things that you pass on to your kids more than money. Of course, if you have a trust fund, that helps. But looking back on your op-ed in the Baltimore Sun with that entitled "Drugs," what is it? Drugs, murders, crime, and special problems of males. Has your perspective changed on in regards to the association of violent crime and the societal gender biases at all? To now?
No, I don't think so. I think that, well, let me mention that I was a parole and probation agent in central Baltimore for a year. I worked as a jail guard at the infamous Baltimore City Detention Center for a year. I worked for the National Fatherhood Initiative for a year, training prison systems around the country on how to run the NFI, National Fatherhood Initiative program called Inside Out Dad, a program for incarcerated fathers. And so I have a fair degree of experience with men who have been in trouble with the law. I was also a facilitator for the Alternatives to Violence Project, which we ran in Maryland men's prisons. It's also run in women's prisons, but I participated in the men's prisons. And it's pretty clear to me, I don't think I could diagram it very well, but it's pretty clear to me that a lot of men who get into trouble because they're trying to be good guys in a very narrowly defined way of being a good guy. Look, I don't. What city are you in? What city did you grow up in, Tommy?
Well, I grew up in San Antonio, but I'm in Dallas now, which is
okay. I don't know what it's like in the Deep South, but up and down the East Coast, in the major metropolitan areas, it is very common for black men to hear, and black boys overhear it, black men ain't shit.
Right.
Now, they're not hearing this from the Ku Klux Klan. They're not hearing it because they're black. They're hearing it because they're male and they don't have a lot of money. And in our culture, if you don't have a lot of money and you're male, you're in a whole different situation than a woman who doesn't have a whole lot of money. And the situation that you're in is that you're a loser. Right. You ain't shit. What person, what human being wants to be regarded as not shit, as unworthy of being in a relationship, as unworthy of being valued for his humanity, for his ability to love his kids, for his ability to be a good friend, brother, sister, uncle? Those are the biases and stereotypes that are very, very salient for men, especially marginalized men, economically marginalized men. Because men at the top of the economic heap, they at least get to not be shit because they don't have money. They at least
they get to be shit all the time. Mark Zuckerberg, prime example. I feel like as I'm not sure where your politics lay. I guess we'll dive into that in a little bit. But I'm a progressive, as you can tell. Go ahead.
Well, I'm a liberal Republican, and there are not many of us.
What does liberal mean anymore? What does that mean anymore?
Well, that's a good question. I have an idea of what liberal means. It's hard to define, but here's a quick little way that I see it.
Go ahead.
A liberal is a person who understands that his grandparents didn't know everything. A conservative is a person who understands that his grandparents weren't complete and utter idiots. That's a quick definition.
Okay. I think I see what you're saying. They really. One thing I've learned about right wingers or conservatives is that they really go off of personal experience. Like, I did it, why can't you? And some of that experience is very valid and it's very useful, but it's like they're missing the empathy kind of part of it. Yeah. And so as a left winger, I feel like the crime, it stems from, you know, the poverty and the income inequality gap that's raging. And it's funny because I asked you what liberal means, because these liberals seem to have voted for Joe Biden, a guy who did a crime bill, a guy who was a credit card guy for the banks. He says he's a corporatist Democrat. He says he is. So what liberal George W. Bush bailed out the banks in 2008. Is that conservative? What do these terms even mean anymore? Because they don't seem to mean what everybody says they mean, and everybody seems to be fine with that. So, yeah. What do you think about that?
In the broadest, grandest, most general sense of political philosophy, liberal still does mean something, and conservative still does mean something. Now, when it gets down into the weeds and people use the terms either as a cloak of virtue or as a weapon to beat the other side around the head and shoulders with, then it gets distorted and ugly. But look, right. You know, the United States, even conservative people in the United States are classically liberal, because it's classically liberal to embrace the idea that in criminal court, you are innocent until proven guilty. That's a liberal idea, because in the olden days, if the king said you were guilty, off with your head.
I know. Yeah. What was her name? The Henry VIII's mistress, who became his wife and then was beheaded. Anne Boleyn.
I don't know. I don't know.
She'll tell you. She'll tell you about that. But yeah. So what did you? I'm interested. What were you thinking in the 90s when this crime bill happened? And Hillary Clinton was talking about the super predators with no conscience and no empathy. What were you thinking of that? Just wondering.
Well, I mean, I wrote that article in 1989.
I know.
And so I was thinking, we are really missing the boat here. The fellows that we are calling super predators are desperate for some appreciation and recognition. They were the prime victims of our supposedly well thought out war on poverty. Our war on poverty has been an utter failure, I think. The war on poverty was really a war on fathers. Or at least we have to say that fathers and men in general were collateral damage in our ill-conceived war on poverty. You know, who needs men? Marry Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam will take care of you. You don't need this loser, you know. Whatever.
I mean, the conservatives are always talking about how they didn't want black fathers in the home. Bill O'Reilly was famous for saying that. I don't know if that was
but Tommy, look, Tommy, there are also liberals who are still saying that, because the liberals will say the reason we don't want black fathers in the home is because they're male and men are violent.
Right.
And having a man in the house when the mother doesn't really think he should be, for whatever reason, maybe she's got a new boyfriend, maybe she just is tired of, men. Yeah. All she's got to do is raise a stereotype about men, and he's gone. He's gone.
I'm glad that you said that, because that gives me a chance to segue into pivoting to what you said in the op-ed. I'd like to get your take on these two specific contemporary gender-related ad hominem attacks, as you were talking about. One of them is going to be, I don't know if you've heard of this, but I'm going to show you the video.
Question. We're trying to figure out what the right amount of space for a person to take up on the train is. Are you familiar with the term manspreading? Manspreading?
No, I'm not. I try my best not to manspread. I mean, the only reason my legs are open is because there's a bag between it, but otherwise I'm sit regularly. it's really annoying when people manspread. I've been the victim of manspreading.
Are you familiar with the term manspreading?
Manspreading? Never heard of it before in my life.
I think that's probably because we made it up.
Manspreading?
Manspreading. Okay, so it's this phenomenon we've noticed when men tend to sit with their legs much wider than women do, and a lot of the time it takes up like a whole lot of space. And you're not taking
Manspreading, a pejorative neologism referring to the practice of men sitting in public transport with legs wide apart, thereby commonly colonizing more than one seat. You're colonizing my seat. Please give my seat back. So just like the damn patriarchy would colonize your seats, they're doing it on the men. They can't help but do it on the subways. They're colonizing on the subways and mansplaining too. What do you think about that? What do you think about manspreading and mansplaining?
Well, I think a lot of things about it. I think it's pretty stupid. I think it's pretty boring. I think it's pretty petty. I think it's pretty silly. I think it's pretty unimportant. I know that if I'm manspreading and somebody wants to have a seat next to me, or if the subway or bus is getting crowded, of course I'm going to close my legs. It's what percentage of men manspread and refuse to decolonize the seat next to them? I don't know. I think probably not many.
You're too reasonable, Jack.
Thank you. I am accused often of being otherwise, but it's okay. I mean, I understand how this game is played.
Don't you know it's the midterms? We're supposed to hate everybody.
Yeah, really.
I mean, that's what really is the root of these problems to me, is these two parties.
So it's pick on men.
Yeah.
Pick on men, keep us on the defensive, never acknowledge anything good that we do. Pick. Keep us on the defensive. And I think one of the reasons that feminism and such people as the one who graced us with that piercingly insightful documentary, one of the reasons they want us to keep us on the defensive is because they have very good reason to be defensive of themselves, and they know that the best defense is a good offense. So as long as they can be offensive toward us and complain about the fact that we manspread sometimes, the less likely it is that anybody's going to say, well, you know what? If you want to talk about a problem that's really impactful between the genders, could we talk about the fact that a lot of women will do such and such, often around a man's or a father's relationship with his children? That's important. That's socially beneficial. But we can't talk about that because it would be called misogyny.
Right.
That would be called misogyny. And fine, if that's misogyny, call me a misogynist. I don't care. But we need to deal with much more important issues than whether a man happens to have something between his legs that might be biologically or physiologically causing him to tend to take up more space in a seat. It's not really terribly important, except insofar as it demonstrates how ugly the environment for men is these days.
I think it demonstrates the fact that these whatever gender biases have they've created. Like you said, the best offense is a good, or defense is a good offense. That's really how women are starting. Like they're starting to assert themselves, and not in like their own power, but into the best offense. I'm going to give you offense. I'm going to be the first one to pick. I'm going to be the first one. Like, let's say Hillary Clinton, the WikiLeaks emails, she pulled out all the stops. If she was a man, do you think she'd be pulling out all the stops like she did? The Russia gate, all of that stuff. It was above and beyond, because she feels like she has to go above and beyond. Women feel like they have to go above and beyond. I feel like that's like the environment that we've now put women in, that they feel like they have to go, because men we're so violent and we're so aggressive that they have to reach above and beyond that. It's kind of an escalation.
I think that they want to escalate because it serves their purposes. And the purpose it serves is that women have a machine it's a very powerful political machine. You know, it's stronger than AARP, it's stronger than the NRA. Who wants to argue against women? Who wants to risk losing the women's vote? And so it works for women to provide for them whatever options they might want to claim to make us as men look as bad as possible. It's not healthy. It's not
Well,
healthy.
It's not healthy, but at the same time, if you look for role models in any, if you want to talk about finances or whatever like that, if you look in the industry, you have Wall Street and the hedge fund benders betting against the American people. You have celebrities that act like dogs, and you have the politicians that are raping people like Andrew Cuomo in his own office. So when you look at the society role models, it seems to like, I don't reinforce these biases.
Men do bad things. Guess what? Women do bad things too. Do you want to?
But different bad things.
Yes, of course, different bad things, because we are supposed to behave in different ways, and so and our areas of responsibility are different, and our forms of power are different, and so we have different forms of power than women, and so the bad things we do are going to tend to be different from the ways in which women do bad things with their power, because their power is different from ours. Would you like to show a video that I made?
Sure.
It's 17 minutes long. You might not want to show the whole thing, but I wouldn't mind a bit. It's about something called toxic femininity.
You want to send me that link on the private chat?
I can tell you. It's a real easy one.
Okay.
Toxfem, TOXFEM, toxfem.
Yeah.
.club, CLUB.
Toxfem.club. It's not going to take me to a porn site, is it? Just kidding.
It's going to take you to
JK. Toxfem, eh? All right. Let's see what we got here. All right. I'm going to share the thing. Let's see. Please hold while we share. All right. The club. All right. We see it.
Yep.
So where am I going?
Well, you see the play button there right under the X in toxic. You might want to scroll up a little bit. Yep. There you go.
All right. Oh, what happened?
Oh, that's a light box. Looks like it's going to be slow. It's going to stagger. That it's not working. That was Hazy. I think her name is Hazy Hirono from Hawaii, a senator.
Right. Okay. Well, while that's loading, I have one more video to show.
Okay.
Of something else, and I'm going to try to get this to load too. But there's something else. So, as you know, I'm Tommy Nation Politics, so I'm very concerned about the political landscape of our country. It's become more divisive, and what's funny is the people in the country have become more divided, but the politicians are lockstep with their incompetence, their reckless spending, their divisive tactics just to get elected, and their criminal behavior. They are a lockstep in it. One of the things they do are ad hominem attacks, like manspreading and mansplaining. So you call yourself a liberal Republican, right? Okay. So that's interesting because I guess was Reagan a liberal Republican? He started the war on poverty. So what was he? Everybody hails him so much.
He was the beginning of the Newt Gingrich style of republicanism.
Well, that's changed. That's literally changed to have no arguments, but we do ad hominem attacks to each other. Maybe Trump started. I don't know if Trump started that. I don't know who started it, but now the liberals have got something called tone policing, where you can have a good argument, you can have all the facts, but your tone is it's too aggressive. So this is the definition for my audience.
Tone policing, also tone trolling, tone argument and tone fallacy, is an anno domini hominem and anti-debate appeal based on genetic fallacy. It attempts to detract from the validity of a statement by attacking the tone in which it was presented rather than the message itself. In Bailey Poland's book, Harassment, Abuse, and Violence Online, she suggests that tone policing is frequently aimed at women and attempts to derail or silence opponents who may be lower on the privilege ladder. In changing their tactics to criticizing how the women spoke instead of what the women said, the men created an environment in which the outcome of a dispute was not decided on the merits of an argument, but on whether the men chose to engage with the arguments in good faith. Bailey Poland, Harassment, Abuse, and Violence Online, page 46. While anyone can engage in tone policing, it is frequently aimed at women as a way to prevent a woman.
All right, is this working now?
Yeah.
Am I getting sound?
Of course it helps that there are women on that committee, but you know what? I expect the men in this country and the men in this committee, and many of them, believe me, because we all signed on to this letter to investigation, but really, guess who's perpetuating all these kinds of actions? It's the men in this country, and I just want to say to the men in this country, just shut up and step up.
Hey, Tommy, we should probably stop this because it's not working too well. Tommy, it's not working online. Tell you what, I'm going to refresh. Well, maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I should. I'm going to refresh.